We wrote this book because we're hoping to provide a kind of comprehensive but accessible discussion about a synodal church, both its roots and its future, some of the theology that kind of sparks this vision of the church, but also some practical ways that we can live it out. I mean, a synodal church doesn't live and breathe unless we accompany each other and adjust our style of being church. So our hope is that this is a book that people could pick up and have a really broad sense of what the synod is and how to live the synod.
And I think we felt a bit of a concern that some people feel lost in the whole thing. What does synodality mean? Is it Catholic at all? So that was one concern. And another concern was, now that the synod is over, how do we move forward? And so we wanted to suggest how that works. I mean, it's not a recipe book, but it meant to indicate things that people can actually do. And those include things that they need to do, meaning bishops and other leading figures and lawmakers in the church, but also things that we can do. So it's to encourage people that it's possible to be synodal, that it's Catholic to be synodal, and gently invite them to be part of the adventure. Well, we hope that they would learn a lot and pass the exam that is at the end of the book. No, that's a joke. There is no exam in the book. As I said, we would hope that they feel that this is truly Catholic, that is very fitting for this day and age, and also that sometimes people think synodality is difficult and it's they up there in Rome or the bishop in the chancery. One of the chapters is about attitudes, specific attitudes people could have, and really, literally, that you could practice at home, that you could practice in your parish. For example, if the point is journeying together, then you could, when you're a reader in the church, then and you need to decide who's going to read with Christmas. Of course, everyone wants to read with Christmas. So the way you do that can be synodal or not, meaning can be a way of really listening to other people's point of view, valuing that with a readiness to change your views, or not. So there you see how close by it is, but also how difficult it is, because changing your views is, of course, requires great generosity and simplicity of mind, and we don't always have that.
I hope that when people read this book, they see that synodality is really deeply rooted in the fabric of the Catholic Church's tradition, that we're not talking about something foreign or new, that we're really talking about how to be authentically church. Another thing I hope people get from this book is that exciting things are happening in the Catholic Church right now. Things that really would have been unimaginable just a few years ago. I mean, the kind of listening and the kind of openness and the kind of creativity. I firmly believe that the Synod has been a spirit-led process. And I hope that this book helps people get excited and inspired to kind of live out this new renewal that's going on in the Catholic Church.
I think in that sense, it is also interesting that we added a chapter detailing a practice of synodality. So the book has been published by the Benedictines, and so we thought it would be fitting to take the Benedictines as an example of synodality, just to show that it is already happening. Some people think that you need to become a Jesuit. I'm a Jesuit myself, so I will not object to that. But there is very different and multiple ways of doing synodality. One of the strongest I find is the Benedictines. You have a very strong hierarchical figure, the abbot, and not who decides. And when the abbot decides, it's done. But on the other hand, you have all sorts of practices and moments that the abbot needs to consult. and he needs to listen especially to the youngest monk. And the youngest monk means the monk without experience, without the formation process. And as the rule then says, God reveals himself often, the word is often, through the youngest monk. So that example can help, I think, to raise that enthusiasm that Kristin was speaking about. Speaking about the future and what is needed, I think there is things needed at various levels. The they level and the us level. The they level is the Vatican. What type of bishops will the Vatican nominate? Bishops who like to listen, like to learn, or bishops who like to teach only. And it is about canon law. There is 10 commissions that are discerning and discussing certain things, what will come out of those. That's the they level, but I think there is also the us level. Any encounter can be or cannot be a synodal. If you're eager to learn, to listen, to change your view, why not to have a discussion? Synodality can also be discussions with the readiness to learn. And I think anywhere you do that, we are on the way to be more inclusive and synodal.
I think that the future of synodality looks like living into reality some of the changed ways we want to think about decision making, about new styles of leadership, about opening the doors to listen widely to people, where we create structures that kind of hold us accountable to some of these new practices or renewed practices. So in our book, I think we try to talk about what are some of the theological commitments that we've made during this process about co-responsibility, about participation, about baptismal dignity, and rethinking the roles of women and new styles of leadership. And then the future looks like, how do those commitments transform our church? And so the process that we're talking about is a large and long one. But as Jos points out beautifully in the book also, it's also a daily one that involves our own attitudes and our own relationships, and our own efforts to accompany others. So I think exciting things are happening and we can look forward to in the church. And plus, this is something we've never done before. And I think there's surprises that can lie ahead for us. And I think that hopefully this book can give us lenses to see some of those surprises.
I think it was a great adventure, and I think it was very fitting for a synodal book. You have all the pluses and the troubles of any life. Different people, the grace that difference brings is enrichment, and the trouble it brings, you need to be open to that and to, create space for the other to contribute his or her gifts. And I feel that is a very, when you do it well, it is enriching and it is edifying, because just the act of creating space for the other person and receiving her contribution, in my case, that was, so I'm very, very positive about how that worked. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kristin.
it was a joy to collaborate with Jos on this book. And to be honest, in my point of view, this book wouldn't exist without it being this collaboration. I was fortunate enough to be appointed by Pope Francis to be on the Theological Commission. So I had some experiences of certain parts of the Synod that I wanted to share with people and talk about. And Jos had done a global study about what people around the world were saying about synodality. He had so much knowledge about, in different parts of the world, what was exciting people and what were their questions. And as a Jesuit, Jos also had some of the interest in spirituality, especially with Pope Francis being a Jesuit and the Jesuit spirituality that Pope Francis brings to this process. So really, this book would not have existed without the two of us coming together. We wrote together one writing session in Collegeville, and we wrote together one writing session in Belgium and in between. And I think the book is a beautiful, I like how Jos called it, synodal conversation between the two of us.
Maybe a final thought, something that I really like is how synodality moves between the practical and the theological. So when we say, Pope Francis likes to speak about the surprises of the Holy Spirit, and I'm a spirit boy, so I really like the Spirit. But that is no more, that is very high and for some people too high, but that is in a way no more than the flip side of listening and conversing and dialogue and consultation. Because what you do in consultation is you suppose that the other person may have something to say, something that is rich, and theologically speaking, any richness we have is a gift of the Spirit. So there you see that listening is actually believing in the Spirit. And if you really if you don't want to listen, then you don't believe in the Spirit. And if you do believe in the Spirit, then you must also listen. So I just find that fascinating, how these two, the concrete, the practical, and the deep spiritual theological suppose one another.
One of the questions that I get asked the most about the synod is, why isn't this bishop doing more? Or why isn't my parish doing more? And synodality is a lot about taking ownership and being the engine of synodality yourself. Having the attitudes and the practices in your community to suggest having listening sessions and to suggest ways that more people could be involved. So our hope is that this book helps people not just understand synodality, but live synodality, to have a synodal prayer life, to be a catalyst of synodality in their communities. So our hope is that this book really helps people understand that the work of living out the synod after the formal synod process belongs to all of us, and that it can be a really exciting, energizing process that everybody can participate in. So our hope is that this really is a useful book that serves the church, that it's accessible, that people feel like they can engage it and read it, and it's entertaining, hopefully, but also that they're learning things in terms of knowledge, but things in terms of practice also.